My name is Cassandra Hawthorne, and if you had told me years ago that I'd be summoned to a wedding I'd rather forget, I might have laughed. Yet there I was, holding an envelope that smelled faintly of expensive perfume and high society, stamped with the name of my long-lost sister, Selina. 6 years had passed since my own family had, in their quiet cruelty, cut me off. The invitation, adorned with elegant calligraphy and ostentatious flourishes, was not meant as an olive branch. It was a performance. Every facet of it screamed of grand appearances, not the delicate tendrils of reconciliation. When I opened that invitation, I could feel the weight of memories crashing over me. Memories of childhood dinners where I had once belonged, of laughter shared freely, and the undeniable bond of blood that was then severed by betrayal and ambition. Now, I received this sumptuous summons with a cocktail of emotions: suspicion, regret, and a faint spark of the old familial longing. But how could I ever justify returning to the very place where I had been deemed expendable? It was as though the paper itself whispered, "Come back and watch the show." And I, forever the reluctant soldier, could not resist the duty of bearing witness. I have spent years building my career in the military, guarding not just borders, but ideals of integrity, courage, and honor. Yet, as I held the invitation, memories of a different kind of battle resurfaced: the battle for acceptance within my own family. The invitation challenged me. Was this an opportunity to finally reclaim my place, or simply another stage for my family's performance of superiority? I knew one thing: accepting it meant entering a battlefield where wounds were not physical but deeply psychological. There's a peculiar kind of strength it takes to invite someone whose very presence has been a reminder of past failures. In that envelope lay not an apology or a genuine hope for reunion, but a reminder of the family dynamics I had long sought to escape. I wondered if my decision was to attend simply for the sake of appearances, or if I would have the guts to confront the ghosts that haunted me. I weighed my options, and as I fingered the embossed lettering, I realized that going might allow me to reclaim a part of myself I had buried under years of loyalty to a family that never truly understood sacrifice. This was not just another military assignment. This was personal, a challenge to stand up and say, "I am more than the betrayal you've inflicted on me." The very invitation was a provocation, and I was no stranger to provocation. With every step I took toward that wedding, I reminded myself that I was coming as Cassandra Hawthorne, a major general who had devoted her life to protecting others. I was a living testament to resilience and a guardian of honor, ready to face whatever performance lay in wait. Even if it meant being cast as an unwelcome guest on a stage designed solely for others, I would make sure my silent strength would be heard. This story, my story, is not just about a wedding. It is about reclaiming my narrative, confronting old demons, and finding a way to honor myself without sacrificing what I hold dear. In the end, whether or not my family acknowledges my worth, I know that my service, my struggles, and my ultimate transformation are proof that I am defined not by the love, or lack thereof, of my kin, but by the unyielding resolve in my own heart. The evening of the rehearsal dinner arrived like a cold, unwelcome wind, bearing secrets of the past. As I stepped into the grand dining hall, every eye seemed to assess me, a silent jury of those who had once been my family. I had chosen to attend not out of obligation, but out of a need to witness firsthand the extent of their pretenses. It was a calculated risk, one that felt as dangerous as any tactical operation I had ever led. The lavish hall was set up with impeccable precision. Ornate floral arrangements, crystal chandeliers, and an air of celebratory pomp were everywhere, overshadowing the personal grievances that permeated the room. I took my seat at a table conspicuously placed near the catering exit, a position that, I soon realized, served as a metaphor for my status here: marginal and ready to be ushered out without ceremony. Every time I looked around, I saw the flicker of disdain in the eyes of those who once claimed to be my family. They whispered amongst themselves, their smiles forced and eyes cold. Selina, my sister, the one who had orchestrated this extravagant performance, moved through the crowd with the airs of someone who had everything under control. Yet, beneath her polished exterior, I sensed the remnants of envy, perhaps even resentment. Her pointed comments and barely concealed glances were daggers aimed at my reputation, a silent manifesto that I was no longer welcome in the fold. I was the outlier, the inconvenient reminder of a past that they had desperately tried to erase. Throughout the dinner, I was treated as though I were an interloper in my own history. Conversations that once might have included me now swirled around me like distant echoes. The clink of fine china and the rustle of expensive linens served as a cruel soundtrack to my isolation. I could almost hear the unspoken command, "Exit stage left." Yet, despite the isolation, I clung to the calm I had cultivated over the years. I remembered the discipline required on the battlefield, where silence was often the precursor to decisive action. Every course that was served, each meticulously plated dish, felt like a reminder of how my presence was an afterthought in this meticulously choreographed event. The positioning of my table was not accidental. It was a silent statement from my family. You are not part of our celebration. You are simply here to serve a decorative role until you fade into the background. Yet, for every slight and every cold glance, I harbored a quiet resolve. I observed every gesture, every barely concealed jibe, preparing my counterattack in a language that transcended mere words. This dinner, like many covert operations before, was a test of my composure. I had learned to watch, to listen, and to let others reveal their true selves when they thought I was not looking. In that grand hall, under the artificial glow of chandeliers, I was no longer Cassandra Hawthorne the soldier. Rather, I was the patient general, preparing to reclaim the battlefield of my own dignity. I silently vowed that by the end of this evening, every slight, every calculated snub would be met with the force of my unyielding truth. As the evening wore on and the atmosphere grew ever more charged with unspoken tensions, the moment of the toast arrived. I could sense it in the collective murmur of the room, a calculated anticipation that something significant was about to unfold. Selina and our mother, Caroline, had taken center stage, their smiles sharp and rehearsed, as if every syllable was meticulously scripted to wound. I was sitting quietly, nursing a fine scotch, when the toast began. In a tone that dripped with condescension, Selina recounted tales from our shared past, each anecdote carefully chosen to underscore my supposed failings, my deviations from the family's true path. Caroline's eyes sparkled with the same cold brilliance as she interjected with snide comments that left little doubt about her disdain for the person I had become. Their words were not celebratory. They were accusatory, sharpening the knife of familial scorn. At that moment, I felt an inner calm that belied the storm raging in the room. I slowly raised my glass and took a measured sip, allowing the burn of the alcohol to steady my resolve. When I finally set my drink down, I knew that silence was the only proper response to the mockery that had been heaped upon me. In a voice as steady and unyielding as a resolve forged on the battlefield, I said, "The people I guard outrank everyone in this room." In that instant, the room transformed. A profound silence fell over every guest as they struggled to comprehend the unexpected declaration. In that single sentence, I laid bare the truth of my life, that I was not simply a forgotten daughter or an outcast, but a leader who had earned respect through grit, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to those who relied on me. The words echoed in the hall like a battle cry, resonating with every soul present. For a fleeting moment, I saw expressions shift. The smug smiles faltered, and even those who had conspired to diminish my worth were forced to acknowledge the undeniable strength that defined me. Selina's confident facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of something akin to panic. Caroline's eyes, so long accustomed to a certain narrative, flickered in disbelief, as if the carefully constructed performance was collapsing before her very eyes. I saw it clearly then. Their need to belittle me was born out of fear. Fear that my very existence was a threat to the carefully maintained illusion of their superiority. I felt neither remorse nor triumph as I spoke those words. Instead, I felt a deep-seated certainty that for every insult hurled in the name of tradition, there existed a counterbalance in the form of honor and truth. My voice was not raised to demean, but rather to demand recognition, a demand rooted in the values I had so rigorously lived by. The subtle power of that toast was that it transformed the conversation from one of familial pity and ostracism to a reaffirmation of my identity. I was Cassandra Hawthorne, a sentinel of justice and loyalty, and no amount of petty disdain could ever change that. As the silence eventually gave way to murmurs and whispered discussions, I knew that this moment was not merely an interruption of an old family ritual. It was a turning point, a declaration that I would no longer allow the careless words of those who once claimed to love me define my path. In that charged silence, my truth was laid bare, a truth that resounded far louder than any attempt to quiet it. Just as the echo of my toast had begun to fade, an unexpected ripple of respect surged through the room. Out of the stunned silence came Elias, Selena's fiancé, rising from his seat. His movement was deliberate, his posture impeccable, as he walked toward me with a gravitas that left no room for doubt. In a simple, yet profoundly meaningful gesture, he extended his hand in salute, an act that reverberated like the call to arms I had long been accustomed to. The sight of Elias saluting me was both surreal and deeply affirming. I had always known what my worth was, but to have that acknowledgement come from someone so integral to this family tableau was both an act of rebellion and a beacon of validation. His salute was not merely a formality. It was a statement, a signal to everyone present, that beyond the veneer of ostentation and hollow rituals, there existed a genuine respect for service, honor, and, importantly, truth. In that split second, the dynamics in the room shifted dramatically. The proud murmur of the guests yielded to an almost reverent silence. One after another, 4 other guests in uniform, each representing their own branch of service, rose from their seats and offered their silent salutes. The gesture, so steeped in military tradition, was a clear, unmistakable declaration. In that moment, the respect I had fought so hard to earn was undeniable. I had long ago learned that in the language of honor, actions speak volumes, and today, the language of salutes was my voice. Selena's expression, already marred by the sting of my earlier words, contorted in shock as her carefully constructed performance began to crumble. I witnessed a moment of pure vulnerability in her eyes as the reality of my identity and worth sank in. In contrast, my mother's face was a mixture of disbelief and fury, as if the very foundations of her authority were being shaken to their core by this act of recognition. But it was Elias's gesture and the unspoken solidarity of the uniformed guests that reminded me why I had endured the isolation and betrayal of my past. Their salute was not directed solely at a military officer. It was an acknowledgement of my journey, my battles, and the sacrifices I had made along the way. For me, that salute was a catalyst, a spark that ignited the embers of all the long-suppressed affirmations of my self-worth. It was a moment that bridged the chasm between my personal triumphs and the family legacy I had once desperately craved. In that quiet, charged exchange, I felt the full weight of my identity, resilient, unyielding, and unwavering. While the world around me had been scripted to dismiss my worth, that singular salute rewrote the narrative in real time, affirming that honor is earned through sacrifice, integrity, and the unshakable belief in one's duty to others. And so, amidst the shocked silence, I allowed myself a small knowing smile. This moment was not about vindictiveness or revenge. It was about the pure, unadulterated respect that comes from living true to one's principles. With every salute, I felt a piece of the oppressive weight of the past lift, replaced by a renewed conviction that I was exactly who I was meant to be: a guardian, a leader, and ultimately, a person who refused to be diminished by the frailties of those around me. No sooner had the echoes of salutes faded than the aftermath of that night's revelations began to take shape. As the stunned silence persisted in the hall, I quietly excused myself from the immediate chaos, intent on confronting one person who I knew could not let this encounter pass without a contentious follow-up: my mother, Caroline. With measured steps and a resolve born of years spent defending my honor, I sought her out in a secluded corner of the venue. I knew the encounter would be as fraught with tension as any combat mission, but it was a confrontation I had long delayed. When I found Caroline, she was leaning against an opulent pillar, her face a mask of shock that barely concealed a simmering anger. "Cassandra," she began hesitantly, her voice laced with the familiar bitterness of denied affection, "I need you to release a statement. The way you've disrupted tonight's proceedings demands an explanation." Her eyes, usually so commanding, betrayed her uncertainty in this unfamiliar role of mediator between family honor and public spectacle. I took a steady breath, feeling the weight of years of silenced grievances and unspoken injustices coursing through me. I told her that the statement she requested was not merely a clarification of events, but a reckoning with the truth of what had transpired behind closed doors. I revealed, in no uncertain terms, that I possessed irrefutable evidence of the measures both she and Selena had employed to sabotage my military career. Every quietly sealed document, every whispered secret of professional betrayal was at my disposal. I could no longer allow the distortion of facts to echo in the corridors of power, nor would I permit my reputation to be defiled by those who had once claimed familial love. Caroline's reaction was instant, a blend of shock and defensiveness. Her eyes widened as if she had been struck by the force of my words, and the stern mask she had worn all these years faltered for a fleeting moment. I saw in her eyes the realization that the narrative she had so carefully constructed was crumbling under the scrutiny of undeniable truth. Instead of pleading for forgiveness or remorse, I stood firm and resolute. I explained that this was not a personal vendetta, but a duty to the integrity of my service and to all those who had faced similar betrayals in silence. In that charged moment, I drew a clear line in the sand. I refused to issue the statement she so desperately demanded, not because I lacked the evidence, but because my path had diverged long ago from the need for her validation. I pointed out that my loyalty to the truth and to the service members who had been similarly exploited far outweighed the need to play into the family's politics. My words were not of bitterness, but of a grim acceptance that certain bridges, once burned, could never be mended. The conversation ended with Caroline retreating into a defensive silence, her gaze fixed on the ground, as if trying to recall where it was that she had first lost my trust. I could see the internal struggle within her, a battle between the desire to mend what was broken and the obstinate adherence to the status quo. But the damage was done, and I had taken a stand that could not be easily reversed. Leaving that confrontation behind, I felt a paradoxical sense of liberation amid the lingering sorrow of familial disintegration. The evidence, the truth of my experience, had been laid bare, and I knew that the path ahead was one of unyielding independence. In that moment, I resolved that my next step would be to turn my personal betrayal into a catalyst for change, both for myself and for all those who had ever felt that the people closest to them had forsaken their duty of care. In the wake of that fateful evening, I found myself at a crossroads, a juncture where the pain of rejection met the promise of new beginnings. I had expected a public apology, or at least a sincere demand for accountability from my family. Instead, I was left with a chasm of betrayal that ran deeper than any physical wound. It was then that I decided to forego issuing any statement to placate those who sought to control the narrative. Instead, I chose a path that resonated with everything I had fought for, a path marked by personal responsibility and transformative action. I envisioned a venture that would channel my pain into purposeful change, an endeavor that not only affirmed my own worth, but would also shine a light on the darker undercurrents of military life. Thus, I resolved to launch the Resilience Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting service members who, like me, had faced sabotage and betrayal not on the battlefield, but at the hands of those they trusted most. I believed that if I could help others rebuild their lives and careers, I would not be defined solely by the wounds inflicted upon me by my own family. Creating the foundation was both an act of defiance and of hope. I recalled every moment of isolation, every snide remark and dismissive glance, and transformed that emotional ache into a driving force for change. Every step of the process required meticulous planning, a strategic mapping of resources, establishing ties with individuals who shared my commitment to truth, and rallying those who would stand alongside me against a system that too often compromised its own for the sake of reputation. I poured my soul into drafting plans for counseling services, legal support, and career rehabilitation programs, determined to offer a lifeline to those who had been similarly cast aside. This endeavor did more than provide solace for the wounded. It became a manifestation of my journey from isolation to empowerment. In building the foundation, I found a renewed sense of purpose, one that transcended family politics and reasserted the honor I had long embodied as a military officer. I realized that forgiveness was not necessarily the path forward. Rather, it was the transformation of pain into a catalyst for broader social good that truly defined resilience. I spent countless sleepless nights crafting the mission statement and setting the foundation's long-term goals. I reached out to former colleagues, fellow veterans, and even trusted adversaries who had witnessed my struggle firsthand, inviting them to join this cause. In every conversation, I reiterated that this was not about personal retribution or public spectacle. It was about reclaiming the dignity that had been so callously stripped away. The Resilience Foundation symbolized a promise to every service member who had ever felt abandoned by the very ones they had sworn to defend. While I could not erase the scars of my past, I could reshape their legacy. In choosing to devote my life to this transformative mission, I reclaimed my narrative. I learned that true healing came not from the forgiveness of those who had hurt me, but from affirming my self-worth and passing that strength on to others. With every milestone the foundation achieved, I felt the weight of those old betrayals lighten, replaced by the steadfast knowledge that I had chosen a path of hope, courage, and undeniable truth. As the echoes of that turbulent night faded into memory, I began to reflect on the journey that had led me here, a journey marked by heartbreak, loss, and ultimately the resurrection of my spirit. I realized that in confronting the betrayal of those who were meant to nurture and protect me, I had unearthed the reservoir of strength that lay dormant within. In the mirror of my experiences, I saw not the scars of a broken family, but the shining testament of resilience that had forged me into who I am today. The wedding, the rehearsals, the salutes, and even the bitter aftermath had become chapters in a story that I now narrated in my own voice, a voice that had grown from whispered regrets into firm declarations of self-worth. I no longer measured my value by the acceptance of those who had long deserted me. Instead, I learned that true belonging is defined by one's inner strength and the compassion one extends to oneself. My reflection led me to understand that the path to self-acceptance is often paved with painful confrontations. The journey was not a linear progression of victories and triumphs, but rather a complex tapestry of challenges that had gradually illuminated the unyielding truth of my spirit. I had learned to see the beauty in reclaiming my narrative, turning betrayal into empowerment, and using each scar as a symbol of survival and transformation. Throughout it all, the Resilience Foundation continued to grow, not just as an institution, but as a living embodiment of the lessons I had learned. Each service member who reached out for help reaffirmed my belief that our greatest strength lies in our willingness to uplift one another, even in the darkest of times. As I walked away from that wedding, from the cruel theatrics of a family that had once denied me love, I carried with me a renewed commitment to honor not only my own journey, but also the journeys of those who looked to me for hope. Today, as I stand at the crossroads of reflection and forward motion, I find solace in knowing that I am the master of my fate. The chapters of betrayal have been rewritten into lessons of fortitude, and every memory, no matter how painful, has carved the contours of a life defined by unwavering dignity and quiet triumph. I embrace the truth that I am not the sum of my past tribulations, but the author of an ever-evolving story of resilience and self-love. In the quiet hours of reflection, I come to understand that every story is an intricate dance between light and shadow, a narrative where betrayal, family dynamics, and personal growth intertwine to reveal the deepest truths of our existence. My own journey has been a living testament to the idea that suffering can coexist with strength, and that the wounds inflicted by those closest to us need not define our destiny. This story is one of fortitude against overwhelming odds, a story of standing tall in the face of insidious betrayal, and ultimately, a story of transcending the confines of a family defined by manipulation and neglect. At its heart, the narrative I have shared explores the complexities of familial relationships, those bonds that are intended to be unconditional, yet are sometimes tainted by envy, resentment, and hidden agendas. The facade of our family's gatherings, the carefully choreographed performances at weddings, the reverberating salutes in a room full of indifference, all these moments serve as powerful symbols of both our shared past and our diverging paths. They remind us that while blood may connect us, it is our decisions and our actions that truly determine our worth. Betrayal, as painful as it is, has been a catalyst for growth. The dishonesty of my family, exemplified in their attempts to sabotage both my career and my self-esteem, forced me to rediscover my inner strength. Every snide remark, every dismissive glance, and every cold shoulder was a challenge that I met with silent determination and unwavering integrity. These moments of adversity became the crucible in which my character was reforged. A leader not defined by the love that was withheld, but by the respect I earned through persistent duty and sacrifice. Moreover, personal growth is a recurring theme that underpins my entire journey. It was through the lens of isolation and rejection that I discovered the transformative power of self-respect and self-love. In choosing to embrace my identity, I learned that healing does not come from seeking validation from those who once attempted to diminish me, but from recognizing and affirming one's own worth. This journey, though fraught with pain, ultimately gifted me the clarity to see that even in the darkest moments, there is opportunity for renewal and empowerment. In sharing this story, I hope to encourage anyone who finds themselves trapped by the bonds of neglect or betrayal to step forward and reclaim their own narrative. Every act of courage, no matter how small, has the power to resonate beyond our individual struggles, inspiring collective change. Through my experiences, I have come to see that our scars are not symbols of shame, but emblems of a life lived with authenticity and passion. They serve as constant reminders that the paths of loss and betrayal often lead to greater heights of understanding and self-realization. The themes of betrayal, resilience, and personal transformation converge in this narrative to tell a tale that is not just mine, but belongs to every soul that has ever fought against the tide of familial disloyalty. It is a story of conflict, of fractured relationships, and yet, most importantly, of the unwavering human spirit that rises, time and time again, above the betrayals of the past. Reflecting on the events that have shaped my journey, I recognize that my evolution is as much an internal transformation as it is a reaction to the world around me. Once, I was the Cassandra Hawthorne of my past, a woman defined by the warmth of a family that would soon betray her trust. Today, I stand as a hardened yet compassionate figure, a major general who has survived the sting of rejection and rebuilt her self-worth on the anvil of relentless determination. In the early chapters of my life, I was often the quiet observer, a listener who tolerated the whispers and side glances that signaled my undesirability. The betrayal by those I had loved most turned my inner world into a battlefield where doubt and regret reigned supreme. But, as time passed, and my experiences in service taught me the virtues of resilience and duty, I began to understand that true strength comes not from the absence of pain, but from the courage to face it head-on. I learned that each cold comment from Selena, or dismissive nod from my own kin, was a challenge that compelled me to forge my identity in fire. My transformation was gradual yet inexorable. With each act of service, Every sacrifice made in the name of duty, I took deliberate steps away from the person who once sought validation from those who had long abandoned me. I embraced the solitude of leadership and the honor of duty. In doing so, I discovered that my worth did not rest on the fickle approval of a family steeped in hypocrisy. As I grew into my role as a protector and a leader, I began to see that my journey was about so much more than personal redemption. It was a beacon for others who had been similarly let down by their own kin. Caroline, my mother, and Selena, my sister, in their relentless attempts to control and belittle, inadvertently became the unwitting architects of my newfound self. Their manipulation and pettiness only underscored the importance of owning one's narrative. And then there was Elias, a rare soul amid the superficiality, whose silent salutes and unwavering support became a mirror reflecting back my true worth. His respect was not born of obligation, but of genuine admiration for the strength I embodied, a strength that I had fought tooth and nail to cultivate. I learned to navigate the treacherous waters of familial expectation, no longer seeking redemption or approval from those who had proven themselves unworthy. Instead, I turned inward. I nurtured a self-love that could not be shaken by the coldness of others, a self-respect that grew with every challenge overcome. My transformation was not sudden, but every step of my evolution was marked by the conscious decision to rise above the bitterness of my past, a choice to redefine success and honor on my own terms. Today, I acknowledge that my character is a mosaic of every trial, every betrayal, every silent victory, and every public stand. I have grown into a persona that embraces vulnerability as much as strength, understanding that true transformation is both a reconciliation with the past and a bold stepping into the future. I am no longer the shadow of a daughter cast aside, but a luminous figure whose light is defined by resilience and the will to forge ahead. In recounting this evolution, I offer my story as both a personal testament and an invitation to embrace the reality that our scars, while reminders of battles fought, are also the emblems of an unyielding spirit. Every nuance of my development, from the isolated whispers of my early years to the bold declarations of my present, is a tribute to the power of self-empowerment. I have learned that while our past may seek to confine us, it is our choices that liberate us. I stand today, a mosaic of every trial and triumph, resolute in the belief that I am defined not by the betrayals of my family, but by the strength I have discovered within myself.